I like bending willow. I can't lie. This is a joy to work with. If you saw the end of my previous video, you'll have seen me comment about the fact that my linings up at the horn here are a little bit low. Now, while I could take an extra 2mm off, and I think it probably would be 2mm off the thickness, the depth of the guitar using the radius dish, I don't want to do that because I don't want to lose another 2mm. These sides are already properly profiled and I want them to leave them more or less as they are. So on reflection, I think I'm going to fill in the gap with the willow, which will be the first task in this video. I will cut that down to size on the bandsaw, get a couple of strips, one go there and then another short section here. And glue that in with the go bar deck, which will be really my first kind of legitimate use of the go bar deck for proper gluing of the guitar. And then when I've done all that, then we can get the final profile sanded into the sides using the radius dishes steering the bus, and all will be good. It's a little bit of extra work than I was planning, but it's all good fun, and let's face it, fun is why we do this. So yeah, all is good. Let's get on and do it. I've worked out that these flex to about 56 centimetres. So with the height of the guitar, I've set these to what I think is the correct height, which is about 685 millimetres. About 685. It's 685 millimetres. I do these things to the nearest millimetre. So let's put the top on and see if I'm right. Possibly make these holes a bit bigger. The end block is, or the head block, is standing a little bit proud, and possibly the tail block too. Although the angle that I've got on these, I put a slope on the blocks to account for the radius, does look remarkably good actually. I'm just going to have to take a little bit off the blocks later, not now. But I think it's going to be stable enough. It's just it should be completely set within the radius, but it isn't at the moment because I've got to do the final radius. Just going to set a couple of rods on the blocks just to provide a bit of stability so the whole thing doesn't tip over. The force that these rods apply is not along the rod. The force is actually between the tips of the rod. So the force that this curved rod is applying here is along this direction, not this direction. However, if I just angle the other end in towards the dish, then I can have the force directed slightly outwards. And for that reason, I don't need to use these little spring clamps, which I thought I might use, to just hold this in place. I can have the rods pushing slightly outwards. We're mostly going to be gluing to the lining underneath, rather than the side, but I would like a little bit of inward pressure just so that it is attached to the side. Let me get rid of this. I only really need those at the other end. There's a good amount of squeeze out occurring. Oh, oh dear. I'm trying to route them all at the same spot really to apply a sort of radial pressure, and it's not really working. I need to angle them a bit more, spread them out. They can't all be originating in the same spot. Got some good squeeze out, which is encouraging. Right, we'll leave that overnight to dry, and then we'll do more steering of the bus. I've now got the lining back to where I would have wanted it glued in the first place, so we can carry on with the radius dish. But you will remember when I had this in the radius dish in the Go Bar deck, I had a bit of a wobble, and that's because the block on the underside is standing a little bit proud, and I don't want it wobbling in the radius dish, because the danger is I will just continue to sand the wobble into it. I'd prefer it stable in the radius dish before I try to work the contour into it. So I'm just going to shave a little bit off on the head block here, and also on the tail block. In fact, on the tail block on the front, which it's standing a little bit proud, and then we'll just see if we can get it stable in the dish before we flip it all over and use the steering the bus jig. I probably should have this anchored in the mould, but we'll see if I can do this freehand. Possibly not. May just depend on how sharp my plane is. I really like my miniature block plane. That's a little bit better. It's not quite standing quite so proud now. And we'll take a little bit off the end block on the front. because it's just about 1 millimetre proud here, and it's going to be easy to plane this off than it is to sand it off. Now remember that I pre-shaped this block to have an angle in it to match the dome, and I've tried to preserve that angle. It's just under 5 degrees. I think I actually did it to 4.5 degrees, which it still is. So let's put it back in the radius dish and just see whether everything's flat now. And hopefully this block should roughly match the dish, even though this is a flat surface and not curved, which the sanding will put the curve in it. That is perfect. So let's get the other dish out and check the front. A little bit of a wobble around this bit here, so I'm just going to adjust that before we do the final sanding. Perfect. That all seems pretty solid. I've got the head and the tail under blocks. Remember, the back's curved, so we're ready to go and put the final radius on the front. I'm going to put pencil. I used chalk last time when it was just the walnut and the sides, but I'm going to put pencil along the linings, but I'll probably still put chalk over the blocks, and that way I can tell which bits are being touched and which bits aren't. Maybe I need to get coloured chalk. Actually, white chalk would probably work actually on the linings. Would it? Maybe. Yeah, why not? No wobble. That's a good start. Or is there? Actually, maybe there is a slight wobble. There's a slight wobble around this point here, which is a little bit high, so bear that in mind. Yeah, we're not taking any off here, but we are taking material away from the other end of the block and this point here, so, but that looks, oh, and also at the end here. But that's all good. So far we're only taking material off the end blocks and the linings where they are slightly prominent. At the moment we've not taken any material off the sides, so that's all good. First time we're now touching the side up here, and we're gradually bringing everything down. I think we're generally a little bit prominent up this end, so I'm wondering whether I should just apply a little bit pressure down there maybe, but I think it's all good so far. We're not quite level with the block down here, so nearly there. We're now flush with the side, just a little bit of a lip there. Almost there. I've just got to take the last tiny little bit off this part here. Just a warning, make sure you don't get any wobbles setting in. The blocks under the ends worked loose, and the pegs were a bit loose, and I was finding the whole frame was wobbling a little bit. It doesn't seem to have affected the sand, but it got me a little bit worried at first, because I thought I was sanding a wobble into it, but it was the whole frame that was moving. But this seems pretty solid now. So okay, I'm happy with that. Get a little bit of is that called swarf? No. Just get rid of that 240 grit. I'm not taking any material away really. And that looks pretty good. I ended up taking over 1 millimetre off, maybe as much as 1.5 millimetres. I know this because I'm almost through the extra bit I glued in here. I haven't quite got through there, so most of the materials come off at the end. Although I was 1 millimetre under here, so maybe I've taken 1 millimetre off up here. But just be aware that you are always taking extra material away, so your thickness is getting less all the time. But I think I've taken about 1.5 millimetres away, which I think is probably okay. Look at the quality of the joint along the edge here. I really like that. The lining's pretty good as well. Just realised before I flip it, I ought to push it through the mould a little bit. So we need some blocks. Oh, dusty. Locate the pins. This should be a lot more stable because the front is almost flat. I mean, obviously it's got a dome in it, but it's able to sit in the bottom of the mould, whereas this has got much more of a curve, and I wasn't able to sit it flat on the table. So this should be a lot more stable. I shouldn't have any problems with the whole thing moving. Right, let's go. And we've got to remember to use a different radius dish, not that one. Interesting, there seems to be a bit of a wobble, corner to corner. I wonder why that would be. I wouldn't really expected this to be low. Ah, it's because the lining is very slightly prominent here. I've taken the linings right down to the side and planed a little bit away here and a fair bit away here. So the linings are all level with the sides, but there's still a very slight wobble. So I'm just going to accept that and just try sanding and see whether the wobble disappears. The wobble is across this axis here. So the end blocks aren't in play. So I think it will be fairly easy to correct, because we should be able to take material off here fairly quickly and then get down to the end blocks. I'm hoping it'll all come together. and as expected, all the material is coming off on the sides here and not the end blocks, although I've touched the corner of the end block here. So yeah, let's just keep going. And the wobble's gone, so that's good. This is going much quicker. I've still got a little bit to do. I've got most of the block here, but there's just this little patch here that isn't touching. It's just dipped by a fraction of a millimetre. And a similar situation up the other end of the guitar. I've touched a little bit of the strap block, but this bit hasn't been touched. I'm telling you this, you can clearly see it, the chalk's here. But we're almost there. It's just the very extreme end of the guitar that's not being touched. Everywhere else is. I'm fine up here, just a fraction out down here. So I'm just going to there we go. That's now smooth to the touch. Bit of 240 grip just to take the swarf off. Well, I'm a bit dusty, but the sides are finished. Yeah! Well, apart from this little bit of swarf here. It took a little bit longer than I'd perhaps anticipated, but I think doing the prep, making sure you've got no wobbles to begin with, and making sure you haven't got too much of the blocks to take away, I think does speed things up somewhat. But of course it still takes a lot longer than when I profiled the sides on their own, because of course you've got the linings and the end block to take away. But we got there, and it's looking very nice. The next video could be quite fun. I think I'm going to do a slight tangential video. It might not be part of the build series as such. So go click that little notify, that little ring my bell. So make sure you don't miss that, because I think it could be quite fun. And with that, I will see you in the next video. Bye!